Hello, School Transportation Nation, and Happy New Year. It is the first episode of 2025. I'm here with Mr. Ryan Gray, editorial extraordinaire. Ryan, Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy 2025, Tony, and everyone out there in Nation Land.
Yeah, we had our first team meeting. We were talking about stories, what's happening in the industry. We're breaking down top web stories of 2024, looking back at the stories that move the industry. And out of the gate in 2025, we definitely had some sad stories, obviously, with the things happening in New Orleans. We got an update. There was a child, a 5-year-old, unfortunately killed in Wisconsin in the parking lot. Just unfortunate to see sad news as school starts back up, and it's definitely something we got to keep an eye on. But we always like to look at stories, positive and negative, out there happening in the industry, and we'll get to those in just a second. Don't forget, guys, this episode is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, by Thomas Built Buses, a leader in pupil transportation, and by Zonar, a leader in smart fleet management. All right, well, we're going to continue in just a second after a quick message. Passionate about student transportation, Thomas Built Buses designs, builds, and delivers many of the safest vehicles on the road. Safety is the foundation of everything they do, and this commitment ensures that Thomas Built is a place where it is safe to build a bus as it is to ride one. From design innovation and driver comfort to durability and ease of maintenance, they build their buses as if their own children were riding on them, because they are, and because every mile matters. To learn more about what drives them, visit thomasbuiltbuses.com. That's thomasbuiltbuses.com. Ryan, go ahead. Let's break down what were the top 10 web articles on STNonline.com, broken down by probably Google Analytics, right?
Yeah, Tony, it was a lot of writing by the staff and by our contributors in 2024. By my calculations, there were over 240 news articles written and about 150 or so wire reports. So 390, 400 articles all told, quite a bit. And obviously, there was a lot to talk about and a lot to report in 2024. But more and more, just also following the trends that we see in the mainstream media and the local media. We talk about this a lot, Tony. If it bleeds, it leads. So our readers were very interested in some of the not so good stuff happening in the industry. So we had a top 10 there. We really the focus or the theme, I guess, throughout these 10 articles was several-fold. Like I mentioned, number one, safety concerns and incidents. That's always top of mind for folks in this industry. So much training involved. So certainly, anytime we had a fatality or a serious crash or something happened in terms of the safety of the students, that always jumped to the top of the list. Also, legal and regulatory updates. So a lot of interest in those. Kind of related to the safety element, substance abuse and driver conduct. We saw several articles on drunk school bus drivers, and it harkened back to me a CBS News report from several years ago. I believe it was before the pandemic, that really shed school bus and school transportation in negative light. And it essentially looked at several high-profile cases of either drunk school bus drivers or school bus drivers that were charged or even convicted with sex crimes. Obviously, there's bad apples in every bunch, but as we reported at the time, I think that article really blew things out of proportion. But yet we still know that this is an issue. And like I said, there's bad apples in every bunch. And so it just harkens back to the training, the oversight that student transporters need to be offering and maintaining. Also saw articles and a lot of excitement and curiosity about technological advancements. So we had articles on that. And, last but certainly not least, community and parental involvement. So it's no surprise that we had this past year and really before that an uptick in parents exhibiting bad behavior at the school bus stop. A lot of it is tied to the quote unquote school bus driver shortage, or late buses showing up or not showing up at all. In the past, we saw it a lot more in terms of bullying on the bus. A parent would catch wind of their child being bullied or getting in a fight the day before, and then they'd show up at the bus the next morning and really want a piece of the school bus driver. Well, now that's shifted, and it's more about the buses not showing up or showing up late. So those were the trends that fit in nicely with a lot of these articles.
Yeah, people are very passionate about their schedules, Ryan. They don't want to be disrupted, right? So they take violence into their own hands and effectively attack the bus driver, and it is really crazy. I know you remember a story about a parent throwing like hot liquid in a bus driver's face and them getting burned. I mean, there's just a lot of crazy out there, and these stories, these top 10. I mean, I just took a quick look at the list, and I'm like, man, mother assaults school bus driver number 10, right? Arizona.
Yeah, exactly. It happened in Arizona, in Mesa. And that parent was charged with aggravated assault. They hit the school bus driver. This is on video, actually. And I'm sure that a lot of folks out there in the nation have some horror stories they could talk about. And I've heard them. I've heard in talking with a lot of directors and fleet managers at our conferences. And I've been shown some, actually, and there's some craziness that can happen when, like you said, when people's children are involved, that really ups the ante, and in this case, the child or the family had reportedly complained to the school bus driver about not stopping at the right location, and they claim that the school bus driver spoke badly to their daughter after the fact. So again, hot tempers, we need to set better examples for the children. And certainly this was not one of those times.
Yeah. And then number 9, a friend of ours down at Hayes ISD, they were off on a field trip. Philly Bonilla, who was a frequent attendee at STN Expo West in Reno, Nevada, we saw his district in the news. One of the buses was on a field trip to the zoo, as I recall, and they were coming back, and a truck driver hit the school bus, causing it to flip, and children died as a result. And it's my recollection there were not seatbelts on this particular bus. And there were reports of, them coming back, and maybe the parents were on the bus as well and had been drinking. There's definitely an interesting element. But right, Ryan, really what was the most shocking and what got people's attention is the truck driver admitted use of drugs, cocaine. The driver was on cocaine that hits the bus full of kids. It is so shocking. It almost doesn't seem real.
Absolutely. And that was a very high profile case. We reported on it extensively. So this was Hayes Consolidated Independent School District in Texas, outside the Austin area. And really, there was video of the crash, shows in this case, a cement pumping truck, veer across the center divider, the center line, and strike the school bus, kind of the front left quarter panel. You could see the school bus driver start to try to take some evasive action. And of course, it was too late. And there was one fatality that happened. Of course, one fatality is always too many, but especially when these aren't preschool kids, they have their whole life ahead of them. I mean, all these children do, but that really gets you. And one of the things that we looked at was, when you're having, whether you're talking about routing, for example, like getting kids to and from school, very few and far between, if at all, really, are full buses loaded up with preschool kids, pre-K. Usually those are fit into routes. The whole routing game comes into play, and of course, school and bell times and whatnot. But school buses have the first 2 rows essentially reserved for these students because those have the integrated child safety seats in them. Well, we're talking about a school bus that was taking, dozens of these students, and there's no seatbelts in these buses. And seatbelts, as we know them or we refer to them, think of them in terms of the lap shoulder belt variety, the 3-point. Those are not appropriate for preschool kids. And this bus, despite the state law in Texas that for many years now has required 3-point lap shoulder belts, this was an older school bus and it was going to be retired, and they needed a school bus and they used this one. So it really brought up some operational issues and decisions on how are we going to utilize these buses, for what students. And of course, this was not home to school. This was coming back from the Bastrop Zoo. But certainly it was an eye opener, and it led to a lot of folks looking in the mirror and talking about it. And in fact, one neighboring school district, they told me over the summer that they had actually purchased their first school bus that was equipped from all seating positions with CSRS for these preschool kids. So certainly, it unfortunately, lessons learned sometimes, especially from a fatality, it really moves the needle. But we saw that in this case.
Yeah, and I know in hearing from Hayes ISD, they definitely moved quick. The school board approved seatbelts across the entire fleet. Now, I don't know about integrated child safety seats in terms of that discussion, but I know speaking to Mr. Bonilla, he said that the school board approved it very quickly. I think there were plans to do it. It's just these plans got moved up as in light of this accident and the public nature of it. Now, if you guys recall, our May issue of 2024, this was on the front cover. It was actually a screenshot, I believe, by REI cameras that caught what the oncoming cement truck looked like from the driver's perspective. And it is quite scary to think of a big cement truck coming and bearing down on you almost head on, and you having as a driver to react, to jerk that wheel. And that's what caused the bus to flip over. And it just was such a shocking thing. So if you want to read more about this story, you can go to the May issue 2024 and catch up more on this, but definitely see the image. I'm sure you can go online and see the video, and go to stnonline.com to see more on this, but definitely one to remember, Ryan.
Absolutely. And then with our eighth most read online article, 11-year-old charged in Maine school bus incident. So this was an 11-year-old girl, and up in Gray News Gloucester Middle School up in Maine, that led to a Maine State Police bomb squad being called because there was this threat. And it always, when we're talking about school buses, always our worst nightmare that we have an active shooter on there or some kind of bomb. So evidently, the bomb squad technicians and K-9 team responded out there with Cumberland County Sheriff's deputies and Auburn police, and they went through the bus and they had to shut down the road and create a whole bunch of stuff. And basically they confirmed later that a suspicious device that they were alerted to or that they found was not explosive. And I think I mentioned a girl, but it was actually a boy who was facing charges of terrorizing because he made this threat, and it turned out to be nothing. But it just shows the vigilance. We can't assume anything. We have to take every threat super seriously. We have to investigate it. We have to respond immediately, and that just harkens back to the importance of working with your local law enforcement. Hold drills, engage them, try to come up with every scenario that you can, so that if something does happen, because it will, and the whole adage, oh, that won't happen in my school district. Yeah, that's what all these school districts have probably thought in the past, and look what happened. So it's extremely important that you engage your first responders. They want to do training. They're always doing training when they're not on calls. They're always looking for the next thing to learn, and they want to work on school buses. Especially when you're looking at the number of electric school buses that are now out on the road. So certainly, yet again, safety. That was a big concern in this one.
All right, before we get to some more headlines, we've got a quick message. Hey guys, what do software, hardware, and safety have in common? One word. TransFinder. At the STN Expo in Reno, TransFinder won 3 Innovation Choice Awards voted on by STN Expo attendees for best software, best hardware, best safety technology. TransFinder's Route Finder plus routing solution and apps, Stop Finder and Wayfinder are well known in the industry. Not everyone realizes TransFinder provides hardware like card readers, tablets, and mounts. And as for safety, Patrol Finder for schools is TransFinder's latest solution designed to make buses and campuses safer. TransFinder's president and CEO, Antonio Civitella, said the recognition means so much because it's voted on by STN Expo attendees. Civitella said, "We know a lot is riding on TransFinder because a lot is riding on those yellow buses that travel through our communities. TransFinder must continue to innovate as more is being expected of transportation departments from district leadership as well as parents." Learn more at transfinder.com. That's transfinder.com. All right, we're back, Ryan. So speaking of seatbelts, Bluebird announces standard lap shoulder seatbelts on all school buses. I was out in Indiana at the IMMI testing facilities, which they call CAPE, and they have a crash test facility out there where they take the buses down the sled. We did it when we were at STN Expo East, and that's where Bluebird made this big announcement. Former administrator of NHTSA, Mark Rosekind, I believe, was there making comments on what he thought would be a transformational moment in school transportation. And not surprised, this got a lot of views, Ryan.
Absolutely. And this was a big, and it's been touted as a game changer. Now, to date, we have not seen competitors of Bluebird jump into this fray, but certainly know that they're having conversations about it. And they probably have been for a while. This is not something that I think many OEMs are just looking at going, oh, wow, like we need to look at this. I think they've had those discussions, and publicly there have been some comments made over the years at our conferences and others from some of the OEMs that they want to basically let their customers make that decision. They have these available, but they don't want to force it on people. So definitely a big announcement by Bluebird. And I'd spoken with some safety advocates in the school bus industry for a long time saying, this needs to happen. And some of the folks, and we talked about this at the time back in June, Tony, some of the folks that I've talked to thought that it would take litigation to really force the hand of OEMs. And certainly not to say that litigation didn't play a role in this, but it wasn't the leading factor. Any school bus manufacturer, probably all of them, have dealt with some kind of lawsuit over their time regarding a crash, regarding the lack of lap shoulder seatbelts on the buses, maybe even due to the seatbelts being on the buses, but not the students not being required to wear them, or whatever the case might be. But certainly a potential hallmark moment. So it will be interesting to see going forward, knowing that all the OEMs, they offer lap shoulder belts, but will this push the needle? So stay tuned.
Yeah, and I think the biggest kind of caveat in this was it was at zero cost to the end user, right? It was built into the cost of the bus. So that is probably one of the bigger things, because cost plays a big factor in people selecting this option. Now, you can check the box to say, I don't want them, but then are you held liable if you make the choice, hey, I didn't want seatbelts on this bus and now there's an accident? You're not going to, it's not a good look, right?
Any attorney worth their retainer is going to bring that up and be like, so wait a second, this was available and you're a Bluebird customer, or you knew about this, but you didn't do it. And juries don't like to hear that. So, and the lap shoulder belts is really what stood out, but there's other technology that's included with this. Steering wheel deployed airbag to protect the head and torso of school bus drivers. We see, several school bus drivers killed during the school years in crashes, and oftentimes because of compartmentalization, if students have lap shoulder belts, because of the training of the driver, when they have these crashes, they're very minor to the school bus occupants, but the school bus drivers often bear the brunt because they're right there at the front, and especially if it's a transit. So that's why some folks have told me they don't specify transit buses. They think they're too unsafe, and other people like transit school buses because for citing safety. So it's really it's always been an issue fraught with a lot of debate. We've called it the Great Debate for decades now, and a lot of folks are really anti-seatbelts still, or at the very least, they don't want to be forced. And that sounds pretty familiar or similar to some of the other things that we're seeing in the industry as well. But definitely other safety technology that was brought to the forefront with this.
Well, stories 6 and 5 also have school bus drivers involved. And number 6, Minnesota school bus driver arrested for alleged DUI. Again, alcohol and driving a school bus do not mix. So that is something that we've seen come up over the years, Ryan. Alcohol and drinking, it kind of scratch your head when you see these headlines. But, maybe that's a product of the driver shortage. People are laxing their standards, or maybe they're not testing. I'm not sure what's really the rationale behind this one, but it always kind of blows me back when I see this.
Well, again, when I mentioned earlier, there's always some bad apples in the bunch, and you look at the sheer number of school bus drivers out there on the road, and the fact that, according to CBS, I mentioned that piece they did several years ago that was really sensationalistic. And they pointed out that on average, one school bus driver a week is arrested often for DUIs. And if you think about it, okay, there's 52 weeks in the year. Okay, so let's double that. Let's go to 104, 105 school bus drivers. Heck, let's go up to 500 school bus drivers, which I think is way too many, because we'd see way more headlines. But when you look at the sheer number of school bus drivers, I mean, and I've seen estimates north of 500,000, because if you look at certified, these might not all be en route, but how many directors, how many fleet managers, how many mechanics, how many dispatchers are also driving. So when you're looking at these numbers, I mean, it's really a drop in the bucket. I think that it's probably more a product of just the 24/7 news cycle. And, again, if it bleeds, it leads. Not to say it's not a problem that the industry shouldn't be looking at it. But when you're talking about, okay, on a high end, 3,000ths of 1%, or I think it's actually 3 millionths of 1%, drivers that are being, that are drinking and while behind the wheel, or had consumed alcohol before. So in this case, in Minnesota, a concerned citizen reported that the driver had been consuming alcohol before they went on duty. And they were worried that the driver wouldn't be sober in time for the bus route. And so concerned citizens, again, if you see something, say something. We don't want school bus drivers having consumed any alcohol. Certainly, I mean, if they do, and it's a school night, okay, have a glass of wine at dinner, but don't go drinking with your buddies. Don't go to the big party and drink a bunch of alcohol and expect to be, on you're in tip-top shape in the morning. Especially when you look at some of these drivers, a lot of the drivers are waking up at 4 a.m. to get out to get to the bus barn so they can start firing up the buses at 5 a.m. There's no way that if you're going out drinking the night before, that by 4 or 5 of them in the morning, you're not still drunk. And, of course, we have also, like apparently in this case, we have school bus drivers that have breaks in the middle of the day. Well, if they're going to lunch and then having several cocktails, well, they shouldn't be then going and getting behind the wheel. So definitely, I think, to your point, Tony, there is some aspect of school districts just needing warm bodies behind the wheel, and no one really wants to admit it openly. But I've talked to enough folks in the industry who they say that it happens, and it's just, again, something to remain vigilant on and have zero tolerance. The CDL regs say these school bus drivers, of course, need to be tested at least once a year. That they, of course, the reasonable suspicion test. So we need to, if this happens, we need to catch these drivers before they actually get behind the wheel and drive off the lot to go pick up kids.
Yeah, another story, Ryan, another school bus driver in Illinois. 3 children killed in Illinois with school bus crash. Now, this was a pretty horrific crash, as I recall, and there was a lot of questions on what happened with the driver, right? Was there a medical situation? I don't think there was. There hasn't been any outcomes yet that we've seen from this crash yet. From was it NHTSA? Did they come out and study this, Ryan?
I have not seen anything further on this. We'd have to do a deep dive, but Rushville, Illinois, so 60 miles west of Springfield, so rural area. And we see oftentimes in the rural areas, that's where we see some of our worst crashes, not just in the urban areas where there's more traffic because these school buses aren't driving at fast enough speeds. But in this case, a semi-truck driver, the school bus driver, and all 3 school bus student passengers were killed. So certainly a tragedy. And again, these children were aged 5, 3, and 3, and actually 2 of them were siblings. So just tragic. And it wasn't known if the school bus was equipped with seatbelts. I would venture a guess it probably wasn't. Illinois doesn't have a law that requires it. Now, of course, many school districts will go out on their own. And that's what NHTSA ultimately decided back when you mentioned Mark Rosekind, who was out at that IMMI and Bluebird seatbelt unveil. He was there and spoke, and he talked about it, and that's when NHTSA required that the lap shoulder belts go into the Type A vehicles or vehicles under 10,000 pounds, but because those vehicles respond more like our passenger vehicles in a crash. But the larger school buses, the heavier ones, you have the crash forces that dissipate based upon the FMVSS regulations and construction. Of course, also they cited driver training, but also that compartmentalization. And they said school buses don't have to have lap shoulder belts, the larger ones, Type C. We're talking about Type C and Type D, but they're leaving it up to the districts to make that decision. So ultimately, the districts are making a fiscal choice in a lot of times, and that's a bad excuse. You never want to use that as a reason for or against, especially against lap shoulder belts. But certainly, it does happen a lot, and it was the latest school bus fatalities that the National Transportation Safety Board sent a team out to investigate. So a lot of eyes on that article.
Yeah, and I recall it being a Type A school bus in that accident as well. There was a lot of questions, but when we saw the photos, it definitely was a Type A. So, I guess we'll keep an eye on that to see if there's any reports as it come out in 2025. And another story, unfortunately, Georgia student left on school bus for hours. Again, child left behind, Ryan. This continually happens time and time again. I know there's technology out there to prevent it, and we've even had sessions on it. I know we've discussed what causes a driver to leave a student on the bus, and they can swear up and down that they walked the bus, and yet there the student is asleep on the seat.
Exactly. A 5-year-old, it often happens with the little kids because they're the ones who are more apt to fall asleep. They're smaller. They just get missed for whatever reason. The driver doesn't do their due diligence and check every seating position under the seats. They're rushed. There's been, obviously some pretty famous studies or videos, and we saw one at TSD showing the folks dribbling a basketball and passing it. And the direction is like, watch how many times the ball's passed, or count, or watch just the people that are wearing white jerseys or whatever. And then there's someone in a gorilla costume that kind of dances in the background, and you're just so focused on the direction of watching, counting how many passes were made, or just watching the folks in white, that you miss it. So again, I think that often plays a part as well. So it comes back again, Tony, to training. You train into your school bus drivers, into all your staff, to be thorough. Just be thorough. Make sure they're walking the bus, make sure they're scanning the bus and looking each and every time, because it just takes that one time and something like this happens.
All right, Ryan. Well, we're rounding out the top 3 stories for 2024 right after this quick message. Hey, have you guys heard the great news? Zonar and GPS Track It have joined forces. This new alignment will bring even greater strength to the industry-leading position of Zonar in the commercial fleet telematics markets they serve. Similar to Zonar, for more than 2 decades, GPS Track It has been a pioneering force in cloud-based IoT fleet solutions and GPS fleet tracking. You guys can learn more at zonarsystems.com. Again, you can learn more at zonarsystems.com. All right, Ryan, we're back. New York State amends school bus camera law following court ruling. What's the story on this one? Why was this number 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of discussion on school bus illegal passing cameras and video. A lot of people think it's unconstitutional. They think it's a money grab, and this loophole that you mentioned, this motorist filed a suit in the District Court of Suffolk County, and he was contending this $250 fine. Because he owned a vehicle that failed to stop. This case was appealed all the way to the Supreme Court of New York. So a $250 fine going all the way to the Supreme Court of New York. I mean, that's a guy that he was adamant that he didn't do anything wrong, or just wanted to be right. I don't know, but he stated that the stop arm camera failed to prove that the bus was a school bus marked and equipped as required under the state statute, or that it had stopped for the purpose of picking up or discharging passengers. So the footage did not show proof that the bus was properly marked. So again, you're looking at the technology and making sure that is the video clear enough. It wasn't apparent that there was colored flashing signal lamps, or that school bus was written on the rear emergency door in black letters like the state requires. So this motorist was able to exploit a loophole, and it was a school bus, but why would they have video on a non-school bus, watching the students get off the bus or crossing the street? But it just goes to show you, when you're talking about technology, ask those questions, come up with scenarios, the worst case scenario, try to really brainstorm what's the worst thing that could go wrong, and what's my vendor or potential vendor's response to that? How will they help me address that to make sure that I'm in the clear? So again, whenever you're talking about loading and unloading zone safety, and especially legal passing, that gets people's attention.
Well, number 2 story, Ryan, that brings that up. 9-year-old boy struck by SUV while waiting for school bus. Another vehicle fatality, right?
Loading and unloading zone. Yep, here we go again. So just it's apropos that this one that happened in Florida, actually a 9-year-old boy, he was seriously injured after being struck by the SUV while waiting for a school bus. And this happened in September. And it was in the morning, waiting for the school bus. And apparently the SUV was parked on the southeast corner of an intersection, also waiting for a school bus. And while the child was sitting on the road edge directly in front of the SUV, the school bus then arrived at the location. Several children get on the bus. However, the 9-year-old boy did not board the bus, and the school bus drove away. And then, according to the news report, the SUV proceeded to drive forward, and the motorist was apparently unaware that the child was seated on the ground right in front of the vehicle, and the collision happened. So certainly, on its face, it does not sound like the school district would have any accountability in this. But do they? Because in terms of training, it falls on the school bus provider, the school district, the transportation department, to provide training on proper school bus stop safety and etiquette for the students. So obviously this kid, hopefully it was a case of didn't follow directions, but still, anytime that you're talking about that, there is liability at play. This boy had surgery for a fractured femur and did recover, but was definitely worse for wear after that. So just again, another scenario to bring to your training team, bring to your vendors, bring to administration, talk about these things, and come up with solutions, come up with scenarios and how to address these things from not happening.
Well, Ryan, number 1, I wish it was a positive story, but it's not. Yeah. Ohio child struck by vehicle while getting off school bus. Again, another student struck, another illegal pass. It's just time and time again, you just keep seeing it.
Yep, absolutely. So this happened in May. When a 2020 Dodge Ram was driving southbound and struck 2 stationary cars from behind. And so then this student was basically collateral damage in this. So a collision that was probably tied to the other motorists. And it says that the other motorists were stopped for the school bus, and this person wasn't paying attention, saw it too late, wasn't able to stop, hit the vehicles, and then those motorists were injured, and then the student was struck. So again, training. You would think, oh well, what's that? The school bus driver. It wasn't their fault, and probably not. But again, what can we learn from cases like this, from scenarios like this, situations like this, incidents like this, to make the industry even safer?
Yeah, just Ryan, it comes back to training, right? And we pump it a lot. We do it at STN Expo East coming up March 20 through the 25th, STN Expo West in Reno, in July. So those shows provide a great opportunity to connect with different technology companies, different stakeholders, different districts, talk about how you can kind of tackle these challenges. I know you're working on the agenda, so I can only imagine these are going to be hot topics. Again, we always look at our website as what's most interesting to you guys, and we definitely see this. I know NHTSA has been working on some different studies. We obviously saw the Kansas State study on illegal passing fatalities and the frequency of illegal passing. There's just a lot of this going on still, and no end in sight. We called it an epidemic, right? And it's really ongoing. And we are seeing more and more technology solutions being thrown at this. And I really hope that it does make an impact. But there's all these kind of different scenarios that you laid out in these top 10 that there was nothing that quite looked identical. Definitely the children being left on the school bus. That's probably the closest thing that I saw. But illegal passing, definitely some unique scenarios that we laid out.
Absolutely. If you can dream it up, it could happen with a school bus or with students. So that's, again, it comes back down to training, and just get with your training staff, get with your drivers, your monitors, aides, everybody in the department, and just try to do the best you can and come up with training opportunities that try to address these things.
Absolutely. Well, hey, special thanks to Ryan for joining me on this episode. Talk about the top 10 web stories on stnonline.com. For you guys, we'll have lots more stories and information as the team churns out content this next year. Guys, we appreciate our sponsors, TransFinder, Thomas Pill Buses, and Zonar. Guys, visit stnonline.com for all latest news and analysis on the school transportation industry. And I invite you to register for STN Expo East in Charlotte. Check out our early bird registration to save $100, stnexpo.com/east for details. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to Pods Nation. We wish you well on this 2025. We'll see you next week.